Good evening, dear friends. I hope you are well, and I hope you're taking good care of yourself. We are going through a very difficult time. All of humanity, the whole world, is going through this plague of the coronavirus, and we are not only suffering from the virus itself, but there's so byproducts from the virus too. One of these byproducts is a fear which it instills in every human being. Everybody I see and everybody I talk to always expresses a sense of fear, uncertainty, and doubt of what's going to happen in the future. And there's also a great disappointment on the part of people with regards to the governments and how the governments are reacting. So let us pray that God will give us this inner strength to overcome not only the virus, but all the byproducts such as fear, such as the economic crisis, such as the lack of education, such as lack of contact with friends, and the total disruption of the social order as we know it. May God bless us all with the ability and the inner strength to overcome this. Last time we spoke about my coming into the forest after a nice march from the farm and coming into the Lipichansky push. We came into the forest. It was a new world for us. The first time we saw a forest that big, it was huge. Lipichansky Push was one of the biggest forests in Belarus, then Poland originally. So we settled in, we made contact with some other Jewish people. In the course of time, we also developed some plan of how to continue with our daily life and daily challenges. We had fear of being noticed by some shepherd or by somebody who's walking in the forest, and fear that they would see us and run into the police and inform against us. Fear that we would starve from hunger. We had nothing to eat. Fear that we would be exposed to the inclement weather that was coming. And fear that we really didn't know where to turn for anything. Because we started our life in the forest with only that which we had on our bodies when we ran away from the ghetto. So little by little, we began to organize some kind of structure, some kind of groups, some kind of cohesiveness. My uncle was very well versed in the region, and he knew the peasants, the farmers, he knew the roads, and so he was actually the official guide for a long time among the partisans. And he would be away from us sometimes 4, 3, maybe one day, but certainly every week. He was on the road. He would leave at night and sometimes come back at dawn. Another times he'd stay one day or maybe 2 days and come back with the partisans. The purpose of their going was to accomplish certain things. One, to see if they could get some food from the farmers. And naturally, they would go to those farmers whom he knew. Secondly, they would try to get from the farmers some weapons. We had no weapons, nothing with which to fight or arm ourselves to defend ourselves. And thirdly, also to find out what was going on in the outside world. We had no radios and no means of communications. And also sometimes the farmers were inadvertent conduits of contact with other groups of partisans or Jewish civilians, like as we were, who lived in the forest, who also came there maybe the night before or maybe the week before. And this weekly excursions was the only contact with the outside world. It was the only way in which we could obtain some nourishment, some food for us, some clothing. maybe some blankets, and also some weapons. I remember that we also had contact with the Russian soldiers who were left behind the front, and they also organized in partisan groups. They already had weapons of their own because as soldiers, of course, they had the weapons, and when they remained behind the front, they had their weapons. They were, in this sense, advanced over us, and they were doing also what we were doing, foraging among the farmers for food and other things. In the meantime, the partisans, as they acquired ammunition, they also acquired means of doing more practical military things. For example, they would intercept a convoy of farmers going to the city, leading produce from the land, maybe some of a cow or a horse or a sheep, as tribute which they had to pay to the German garrisons of whatever city or town was the major area in the region. When the partisans would intercept such a convoy, they would give the peasants, the farmers, a letter stating that the partisans have confiscated, the producers confiscated the farmer's cow or horse or wagon, and the farmer would take this to this town and show it to the authorities, and they would accept it most of the time, but some of the times they would insist the farmer should go home and bring another cow or another horse or something else instead of what he was supposed to have brought in the first place. In many ways, the farmers were put in a very difficult situation. The partisans also began to execute very important military actions. They would mine the roads, mine the railroads, they would mine bridges, and they began to really fulfill a significant military role in fighting the German occupation. And so, as we were progressing along those ways of life, in the meantime, we also acquired a certain amount of self-confidence and began to see how we can adjust to the new life. In anticipation of the coming winter, the men got together and they decided to build bunkers. And we built bunkers in an adjacent forest, and there may have been 10, maybe more bunkers, in which each bunker there may have been 12, 10, maybe 20 people, depending how large the group was. And we were ready to move into these bunkers for the winter. In the meantime, we called this Teil. As a child, I didn't know what the word meant. And they asked, what is Teil? So they said, Teil Aviv. This is the name for the first Jewish big city that the Jews built in Palestine in the 1920s, I believe. And today it is the big city of Tel Aviv in Israel. And this little group of our bunkers was called, a cluster of bunkers was called Tel Aviv. And we moved in there sometimes around the end of October, beginning of November, and we began to live there. I remember we also made from barrels, from metal barrels, oil barrels, ovens inside to keep warm. And basically we were assuming that we are going to stay there for at least the duration of the winter. But lo and behold, on the 12th of December 1942, the Germans brought in an army of about 30,000 soldiers, so I heard. And they surrounded the entire region, the entire forest. They blocked all crossroads. They occupied all villages so as to lock the partisans in the forest and not give them a chance to move or to run or to basically go anywhere to break out from this grip. At that time, we already had among the Jewish people a group of fighting partisans exceeding 300 men. They were structured as a military unit with a commander, with assistant commanders, and they participated throughout this period of weeks in a lot of actions. I should also note that in the few weeks between August and December, and still in the fall, the partisans managed to free from the ghetto in Novogrudok a number of Jewish men who were transported from Zetel to Novogrudok. Among them were my aunt's three brothers, Iser, David, and Yerachmeel, and they came and they were also part of the fighting partisan group with all the rest. And my aunt's brother-in-law, Zetel, he was also with them. My uncles basically stayed with us as the head of the family, and he was protecting us, except for the days when or nights when he was on a mission to guide the partisans through. On December 12th, 1942, our entire, so to speak, tranquility changed, and a new phase began, and a new devastation of life and loss of life, unimaginable, took place. We'll stop here, and I wish you all the best. Take good care of yourself, watch the instructions, and God help you to overcome this plague with which we are now all inflicted. God bless you. Till next time.